Ghost of Tsushima has been out for a few weeks now, and I know my video is pretty late to the party, but it's given me enough time to form my thoughts on the game and has given me plenty of time to actually sit and play the game. And trust me, when you sit down to play Ghost of Tsushima, you really end up getting sucked into the gameplay, because I have had that thing happen to me where you sit down to play a game and you look at the time and all of a sudden 6 hours have passed and you have absolutely no idea how that happened. And that was before I started doing all the side quests and encounters the game wants you to do. I'll get into those in a little bit, but for the first part of my playthrough I didn't do that many side missions. I did the ones in the bottom region of the map, that was about it. Then I just sailed on through all of the main story missions because I wanted to beat the game somewhat quickly so I could see what happens and start writing my review. And I'm kind of glad I played it that way, because yes, I probably was underpowered in a sense from not doing side quests and unlocking more health and stronger upgrades, but it meant I didn't get open world fatigue, which likely would have made me less eager to jump back into a play session the following day. Before we get into today's samurai filled review, please consider hitting the like button and maybe even subscribing, as it helps me with getting recommended to other people just like you. I'm going to start by going over the start of the setup of the story. Spoiler free, of course. I just always like to do this when I'm doing a video on a game that, well, has a good setup to the story, or I feel the video needs the context of the story. Ghost of Tsushima begins with the samurais of Tsushima's island getting ready to go into battle with the great Mongol army. The leader of the samurai, Lord Shimura, sends their best warrior, Lord Adachi, to break the Mongols' spirits. But unlike the samurai, the Mongols don't fight with honor or by a code, so in a sort of unexpected way, the Khan, the leader of the Mongol army, throws his drink over Lord Adachi, making him flammable, and burns and beheads him. Now, knowing what sort of monsters the Mongols actually are, the samurai charged into battle and essentially all died except you, the main character Jin Sakai, and Lord Shimura, the leader of the samurai, who gets taken by the Khan and held prisoner. That's all you need to know. The game then gives you the task of freeing Lord Shimura in the first act, and honestly, this story had some twists that I was not expecting at all. Like, I wasn't sure how deep this story could actually go, but I genuinely got invested in the characters, and when certain things happen, they really come out of left field. Like when the Master Chief showed up in a PlayStation exclusive game, and the bit where Joel from The Last of Us came in with an assault rifle, which was really weird considering the game is set in the late 13th century, and judging by the first Last of Us game, Joel was born at some point in the 80s. Okay, all joking aside, the story has some genuinely shocking twists that I was not expecting from a game about sword fighting and late 13th century Japan. The story is genuinely good enough for you to feel like it's worth coming back to the game every time you play because of the ways it plays out, and that's always a good thing. Jin Sakai is a great main character because of the moral issues and dilemmas that he is faced with throughout his journey. It's the fact that he is a samurai. Samurai are warriors who fight by an honourable code. They don't sneak around or stab an enemy in the back. They don't use cheap tricks or try and get one up on the enemy by any ill means. They don't let their emotions control their blade. Once they have mastered all that and are trained to use a katana with extreme precision and skill, they are a true samurai warrior. But the Khan and his Mongol army killed almost all of the samurai on Tsushima Island, so Jin, aided by a thief Yuna, had to break his code and learn an all-new way to fight. It went against everything Jin knew as a warrior. He grew up believing anyone who would jump from the shadows was a coward or a criminal, but he saw what the Mongols did to his fellow soldiers, his people and his home, so he had no other choice but to become the Ghost of Tsushima. And as you progress through the game, you learn new tricks, get new weapons that make you faster and more brutal in combat, and you'll notice the people you rescue will say things like, "I've never seen a samurai fight like that. I didn't know a samurai could be so brutal," and some are horrified, but some accept that Jin has to change his ways or he wouldn't be able to save Tsushima from the grip the Mongols hold on it. The thing is, Jin knows he has to fight this way, and it isn't until about the end of the second act that he stops worrying about what other people will think about his new fighting style. But in the beginning, you get flashbacks to a younger Jin getting trained by Lord Shimura about honour and fighting like a proper warrior, which plays on Jin's mind. But like I said, he knows what has to be done to save Tsushima. We may as well talk about combat now that I've mentioned how Jin's Every sentence in this script is a tongue twister because of the Japanese names and the word Tsushima. We may as well talk about combat now that I've mentioned how Jin's conscience plays on him throughout the game. There's actually quite a lot to the combat of this game, and I think I've figured out how to break it up into different sections. First, we'll talk about combat stances. There are 4, technically 5, but I'll get the main ones out of the way first. You get the stone stance first, and it's the most basic one. It's good against swordsmen. You use triangle, which is your heavy attack, to break their guard, allowing you the perfect opening to go in and finish them off. The difference between the different stances is which type of enemy's guard you can break. The water stance is used against shield enemies, the wind stance is good for taking down an enemy with a spear, and finally the moon stance is for taking down brutes who do the most damage. It doesn't matter what stance you use against archers, because once you get close to them they are practically defenseless when they aren't attacking at range. Then you've got the 5th stance, which I briefly mentioned, and it's the ghost stance. I can't remember what part of the game you get it, but basically if you either get a kill chain or sneak assassinate a general or leader, you get the opportunity to enter the ghost stance. Everything goes black and white except for the flash of red of you killing enemies, and it essentially gives you 3 easy one-hit kills and makes Jin look extremely powerful. I initially thought the combat was very unfair in this game because I kept on dying over and over again, and I was getting very frustrated. What was happening was every time I engaged an enemy, like 2 other enemies would also attack, not giving me a chance to kill any of them. So for the purposes of getting this video, I did change the difficulty to easy, which I didn't want to do, but I was just getting beat down so bad by the game. I also think I was probably too underpowered for what I was doing, because as you travel further north in the island of Tsushima, the enemies get stronger and more challenging, and because I wasn't really doing side quests, I was just throwing myself into story mission after story mission, which I'd assume most people do at least some of the side stuff, because I wasn't getting extra health or anything like that. When in combat, you can begin the encounters with a standoff. You press up on the direction buttons and one of the enemies will approach you. Then you have to time pressing triangle perfectly with the enemy swinging their weapon. If not, you'll lose a load of health and have to attack normally. Generally, combat is just fun. It's standard enough: square for light attack and triangle for a heavy attack. And it seems like a lot of games use that system now. In the different stances, holding triangle is a different heavy attack. It ranges from using your sword in a swift stabbing motion that sometimes goes straight through the enemy, to you spinning around like a whirlwind, to you launching the enemy with a kick. Combat is nicely varied because of how often you have to change stance in a group of enemies, and once you start mastering it, the game gets so much better and it's satisfying to pull off all of the different moves. You can also parry attacks, which when done right feels so fluent and opens the playing field for you to get a critical strike in on an enemy. For the attacks that Jin can't just parry with his sword, there will be a red glint allowing you to dodge out of the way, which also opens the enemy up for a strike. Also, you can unlock a role in the skill tree branch, which I like because the Mongol archers yell before firing to give the Mongols warning to duck, giving you the cue to dodge a roll. Another part of Ghost of Tsushima's combat is duels. I only learned that they were called duels a couple of days ago because I thought they were just boss fights, which I mean, that is essentially what they are. They just are not referred to as boss fights. They're normally a bigger enemy like a warlord or sometimes a story specific fight that is one-on-one and you can't use your bow or anything, it's just sword fighting. The enemies have either a sword or a spear or a sword and a shield. The actual fight isn't incredibly different to a normal fight, it's just that Jin and the enemy are talking to each other and the enemy has more health than a regular enemy in a regular fight. And finally, the last bit of combat I want to talk about is the bow. Fairly standard, pull the string and you shoot. There are different arrows you can change between, and I didn't know there was more than one bow because I did hardly any side quests, but I only have the half bow and I saved a really cool clip of it, and I hope whenever I'm editing I remember to include it here. The bow is also very useful for stealth and it's good fun to use. There are a good few sections of the game where you are forced to be the Ghost of Tsushima. Everything I talked about so far can be pulled off as an honourable samurai fighting by the code, but it is more fun to be the ghost. The stealth sections have you running along rooftops and sneaking around in long grass, where you can jump from the shadows and assassinate Mongol soldiers without being seen or noticed. This is where the game feels a lot like an old Assassin's Creed game. I say old one because I haven't played Origins or Odyssey and I've heard they're different, but I have played Assassin's Creed 1, Assassin's Creed 2 and the PSP Assassin's Creed game Bloodlines. And the way you sneak around and kill enemies feels like one of those old AC games quite a bit. Even the animations when you're climbing look remarkably similar, but that is definitely not a bad thing. I've heard people complain about the direction that Assassin's Creed games are going in, and that would make Ghost of Tsushima perfect for those people and is a genuine selling point for the game. I'm not sure if the developers at Sucker Punch Productions were heavily inspired by the old AC games, but Ghost of Tsushima was in development for about 6 years according to a quick Google search, so they would have started development on the back of Assassin's Creed 4 coming out if they did draw anything from it. Nevertheless, stealth is great in this game and they never force it down your throat either. Some missions require you don't set off an alarm, but the path in those missions is somewhat linear and easy to spot, which I find is important when stealth is required in a game. Plus, the upgrades are super satisfying to pull off, and as you upgrade your smaller sword, they become quicker and more brutal. Then, as you learn more abilities, you can unlock chaining together assassinations, letting you silently kill up to 3 enemies in one quick flash without anyone seeing. I generally dislike stealth in video games, but it often feels unfairly implemented. Here, it works great, and I had a lot of fun with it. You'll unlock a grappling hook not too long into the game, which is really useful but isn't really implemented all that much into the game. It's used for scaling cliffs or buildings and it works really well, but because it's acquired in a story mission, the open world doesn't have that many areas which uses it. It's generally just getting to certain shrines, and the story missions that use it after you unlock it use it quite well, and when it's used, it is really fun to swing from branches and scale cliffs. I just wish the game did more to implement it, maybe if they gave it to you from the start. Climbing is a lot like Infamous climbing, which makes sense considering it's the same developers, but here the climbing feels just a little bit more refined than what Sucker Punch Productions have offered us before, and I really like it. The one gripe I have with it, however, is you can't hit X or the cross button to jump. You just have to guide Jin with the analog stick, and it goes against everything my reflexes know about climbing in a video game. I don't know, I just thought that was worth mentioning. It's almost like the climbing in Uncharted Golden Abyss on the PS Vita, where you run your finger along the touchscreen and watch Nathan Drake climb for you. Only in Ghost of Tsushima, you're guiding Jin with your thumbstick, not your thumb. It works though, and it's just another aspect that ties this game together nicely. Something that is really cool about Ghost of Tsushima is the old Japanese culture. It's clear that the developers were trying to be as authentic as possible while delivering a brilliant story and brilliant action. You've got these side quests that I can't talk about too much called The Legends of Tsushima, and they are often told by a musician or someone who gives you a story of a legendary warrior, armor, or a weapon and tells you how to find it. And every one of these mythic tales are fun to complete and make the open world feel way more lived in, which I love. I've done a handful of them and I wish I did more before beating the story, because what they unlock for combat is really useful and I could have done with the unlocks earlier. Part of being a ghost is being fast and efficient, so throughout your journey Jin unlocks different tools or weapons that a regular samurai would not carry. I would have mentioned them when I was talking about combat, but I talked about combat for literally 1,000 words and felt that I needed to break it up. You get kunai, which are like throwing stars, and they were the ones I used the most to attack the Mongols. They are super quick and fun to use, making them highly effective in combat. Then you've got the sticky bombs and black powder explosives, which I feel should be a one-hit kill, but they do decent splash damage to make a group of enemies a one-hit kill each after they've been hit. You've got smoke bombs, allowing you to do some really cool ninja style encounters where you throw one and make a quick exit without being seen. If you're sticking to the shadows, you have a blowgun with poison darts, and it's really fun to hit one of the strongest Mongol warriors in a village with a poison dart and see all his warriors panic. There is a lot to combat in this game, and trust me, it isn't going to disappoint you. There are a lot of things to do and go and see on the map of Ghost of Tsushima. It's modelled after the real Japanese island of Tsushima, and I think that's really cool. I reckon if there wasn't a little pandemic going on right now, the tourism industry on Tsushima Island would be booming right now. The game island, however, given the time period, is nothing like what the island is like today in terms of buildings and things to go and see, but it is super lived in. The Mongol forces have claimed it as their own, so Jin has an insane amount of land to free from the clutches of the Khan. There are a load of villages for you to make your way through, and there are a load of farms to clear. Basically, the game is going to keep you busy, and if you enjoy the combat, which you will, the game is going to keep you coming back for more. Especially if you love that feeling of clearing every location on an open world map, because I know I do. Apart from the legends I talked about, you have fox dens, which if you follow a little fox, he will bring you to a shrine where you can pray, and if you follow enough foxes, you unlock a charm slot. Charms are these little things that give you little bonuses in combat and boost certain stats slightly. Then you've got bamboo cuts, which are little button mini games where you have to hit the right buttons on screen in quick succession, and it's definitely harder than it looks. And there is much more in this open world, and I have spent over 20 hours in the world of Ghost of Tsushima, and I haven't seen all the things it has to offer. If there is any game to try and get the most out of £50 or $60, this is the one, because there is just so much to do. I really want to get the Platinum Trophy for this game because it has a fairly high, 6% rate, but it may be easy to do all the things that the Platinum needs, but there is just so much to do, and I do not have enough time to do it soon. But someday I will just keep on coming back to Ghost of Tsushima. I love the way you travel in Ghost of Tsushima because it's very unique and not like any other open world game I've played. Okay, maybe it's very vaguely like one, but I'll mention it in a minute. I've broken it down into two aspects, and the first aspect isn't that unique, so we'll get it out of the way first, and it's your horse. You get your horse at the very start of the game, and you pick which one you want and name it. The game warns you that this is your horse for the rest of the game. Are you sure you want to name it this? Which kind of makes you appreciate the horse more. It's like getting attached to it. I named my horse Sora because I like Kingdom Hearts, and it was the only name I recognised. Your horse does stay with you for the entire journey, and you feel like it's the best companion you have. It's always there when you whistle, and without it you wouldn't be able to get to the locations that you need to go to. I mean, you could walk, but come on, who's going to do that? The second aspect of Ghost of Tsushima is the way you are guided throughout the land. If you run your finger up on the DualShock 4's touchpad, you are given a gust of wind, which you follow to your marked location. It's hard to fully explain, but it works surprisingly well, and the closest thing it reminds me of is how you get to your locations in Shadow of the Colossus. In that game, you hold your sword up to the sky and focus it on the direction you're meant to go. Look, I know that's actually quite different to the wind guiding you, but they're both unique, and the wind mechanic in Ghost of Tsushima is really cool. Ghost of Tsushima also made me realise that when used right, the DualShock 4's touchpad is actually really useful. In this game, it essentially acts as a second set of directional buttons, the only difference being you're swiping in the direction, not pressing physical buttons. I wanted to mention that because it makes so much sense how useful it is, but it took almost 7 years and the last big exclusive to make me realise that. Let me know down in the comments if any other games do this, because I've probably played games with this functionality and just forget. I mentioned the way the wind guides you in Ghost of Tsushima, but there is a reason it works so well. Every blade of grass and flower in the game are separate. This is the best foliage that any video game has ever seen, and it's a technical masterpiece. When you get the wind to guide you, literally every blade of grass moves individually, and it sets a very high bar for other open world games in the future. Then you've got the general graphics of the game, just amazing. I played on PS4 Pro, so I got the nice 4K treatment, and it's just brilliant. The colours that the Japanese countryside offer are beautiful, and the areas that Ghost of Tsushima offer are so diverse and varied, making everywhere a joy to look at. The only letdown about graphics for me is, and I'm not sure if you can even call this a letdown because I'm sure I'll have to get used to it, the facial animations seem a little bit off. And look, this is because The Last of Us 2 spoiled us with insane animation talent, so I think everything looks off just a little bit in comparison, but to be honest, I can't fault the game over facial animations. I just wanted to point it out. Everything else, like the rivers and the mountains and just everything, looks so good. The art direction this game took is so visually appealing, and if this game gets a PS5 enhancement patch, I can't even imagine how good it will look. To conclude, Ghost of Tsushima was a brilliant game that I'm still not done with and won't be done with for quite some time. Being the last big PS4 exclusive, exclusive means something, and this game did an amazing job of sending off the PS4 to start becoming a legacy system. Of course, the PS4 still has a few years of life left in its bones, but for AAA Sony games, Ghost of Tsushima wraps things up so well, and it deserved a more thorough video than I normally do to send off the PlayStation 4. If I had to give this game a rating, I would give it 5 Jinsakais out of 5 Jinsakais. And you're doing yourself a disservice if you don't go out and pick it up. Or hey, maybe watch someone play it online. I can't tell you what to do. Well, that's it for today's Ghost of Tsushima video. I loved the game and I loved putting this video together for you. If you enjoyed today's video, please consider hitting that like button. I've put a lot of effort into it, and also maybe subscribe if you want to see more from me, Anthony. If you want to stay up to date with the channel, you can find me over on Twitter as @AnthonyJGaming. I'm pretty active over there, so why don't you say hi? If you want to see what games I'm playing, you could add me over on the PlayStation Network. I'm AnthonyJGaming as well over there. And finally, you can find me on Instagram as AnthonyJosephGaming. Thank you again so much for watching. Bye.